Let's talk about how the ancient world where Christianity developed differed from today's world in terms of religious and spiritual beliefs. Hello, and welcome to my ex-Christian Bible study bonanza. I am here to help you deconstruct. We're talking about the textbook, The New Testament, written by ex-Christian biblical historian Bart Ehrman, and this is part 2 of the 3rd chapter. Please come along. I'll remind you that in ancient Greece and Rome, the people there were believers in many gods, also known as polytheism, a belief I personally subscribe to. I'll have a little more about that in a moment, but first there are some key aspects about how they worship those gods that we need to bear in mind. As Dr. Ehrman says on page 49, for most ancient persons, religion was not the way to guarantee an afterlife. It was a way to secure life in the here and now. On page 50, the gods were not impressed by anyone's beliefs about them, nor did they require people to say the proper creed or acknowledge the proper truths. What mattered was how people showed their devotion to the gods. On page 47, there was no such thing as separation of church and state. Since the gods made the state great, the state responded by encouraging and sponsoring the worship of the gods. Page 53, there was no sense of exclusivity in Greco-Roman religions, no sense that one group's gods were real and another group's false, that a person had to convert to certain gods or be punished. That meant that in their society, their ruling class was inseparable from their church leaders. Depending on the region you were in, the ruler was seen as one of the gods, and offering and sacrifices were given to the divine part of him so that he could continue to keep the people he ruled over safe. But when I say he was seen as one of the gods, there was a hierarchy to this. He wasn't seen as on par with Zeus by any means. He was lower in the pyramid from the gods of Olympus or even the gods of the city. At the top of the pyramid, we have what many scholars and philosophers of the time saw as the one true God, who was so supernaturally foreign and unapproachable as to be pointless in everyday life. Remember, the point of ancient religion, if we can call it that since it's a modern invention, was to create a secure life now. There was rampant disease, many deaths in childbirth, and all the ancient ick that we're familiar with. Who cares about the afterlife when 4 of your 5 kids are almost guaranteed to die before reaching adulthood? So the common people especially didn't care much about this one true lofty God that was uninterested in helping make their existence on earth better. That was the domain of the philosophers. Next were the great gods: Zeus, Hera, Artemis, Apollo, Hecate, which is the goddess I'm devoted to. They all fall into this category. They were concerned with human life, and the stories told about them showed that they had things in common with humanity. Next was a class of local gods and daimonia, who were even more involved with human life when they wanted to be. These were still unembodied creatures who had their own agenda and culture outside of humans, but could be petitioned and persuaded to intervene if one did it correctly. Finally, there were the divine beings that incarnated as human, and the demigods that were half human and half immortal. The emperor, the ruling class, and the heroes spoken about in the ancient classics all fell into this category. They were more than human, but less than the gods, and this was very important to how Christianity was viewed by the Romans as it developed. Jesus, as a person born of a woman and a god, was seen as existing on this tier. There was a place for him, and his story made sense in their stories. If Christianity hadn't in some way fit into this worldview, it would have been seen as nonsensical. And I will go out on a limb here and say that this worldview came first, and then the stories of Jesus and others like him, more on that in the next video, were developed from this logical framework. It had to have been that way because this framework was there first. In the 3rd and final part about chapter 3, I'll talk even more about how Jesus fit in with the Greek and Roman view of deities.